Somewhere between the Caribbean dawn and the silence of the sea, a young woman vanished. Her name was Amy Bradley, 23 years old, full of life, on a dream cruise with her family. But on March 24th, 1998, as the Rhapsody of the seas cut through calm waters, Amy walked down a corridor and was never seen again. No body, no struggle, no trace, just a half-empty coffee cup on the balcony and a mystery that refuses to sink. Some say she felt overboard impossible. Her family insists. Some claim she was seen days later, terrified, on a tropical island. Others whisper of human trafficking, cover-ups, and secrets hidden beneath luxury decks. For 27 years, the ocean has kept its silence. But every so often, her face appears in a blurred photo, a witness memory, a dream that won't fade. So tonight, we sail through the fog of uncertainty to ask not just what happened to Amy, but what the sea is still hiding. You're watching the Mystery Vault. If you believe every disappearance leaves an echo waiting to be heard, like, share, and subscribe. Because tonight, we're listening to the waves that remember the cruise begins. It was supposed to be the trip of a lifetime. In March 1998, the Bradley family, Ron, Iva, and their 23-year-old daughter Amy boarded the Rhapsody of the Seas, a luxury cruise liner sailing through the Caribbean. For the Bradleys, it was a celebration. Amy had just started a new chapter in her life, an accomplished swimmer, college graduate, and full of energy. Photos from those first days show a young woman laughing, sunburned, alive in the bright Caribbean light. But behind every photograph, there's a moment that becomes the last one. On the night of March 23rd, the ship hosted a Caribbean-themed party. Passengers drank, danced, and mingled with the onboard band Blue Orchid. Amy was seen chatting and dancing with the band's members before returning to her cabin with her brother around 1 a.m. It was an ordinary night at sea, or so it seemed. Around 5:30 a.m., Amy's father Ron woke briefly and saw her asleep on the balcony. By 6 a.m., she was gone. Her shoes were still there, her cigarettes, her ID card. The sea stretched endlessly in every direction, calm, empty, and quiet. Amy Lynn Bradley had vanished. Within minutes, confusion turned into panic. Her parents searched every deck, every hallway, begging crew members to make an announcement, but they refused, fearing it would alarm other guests. The ship kept sailing. In the space of 30 minutes, a dream vacation had turned into a waking nightmare. For the Bradleys, it was the beginning of a 27-year search for the truth. But for everyone else on board that morning, it was just another sunrise at sea. The morning she vanished. It was 6 a.m. on March 24th, 1998. The Caribbean sun was rising, painting gold over calm waters, a perfect morning for passengers aboard the Rhapsody of the Seas. But inside cabin 8564, panic was already setting in. Amy Bradley was gone. Her father, Ron, had woken just moments earlier. He remembered glancing out to the balcony around 5:30 a.m. and seeing Amy sitting there, wrapped in the warm sea breeze. He closed his eyes again. When he looked back, she wasn't there. Her sandals sat neatly by the chair, her cigarettes and lighter untouched. No sound, no splash, no sign of struggle. He checked the bathroom, empty. He checked the hallway, empty. As he searched, an uneasy feeling grew in his chest, the kind every parent prays never to feel. Within minutes, the family was tearing through the ship. They checked the pool deck, the restaurants, the stairwells, the elevators. Amy was nowhere. Ron and Iva begged the crew to make an announcement to ask passengers to look for a young woman, 5 feet 6 inches, athletic, short brown hair, green eyes. But the staff refused. They insisted Amy had probably gone for a walk or slept somewhere else. To make an announcement, they said, could upset the other guests. It wasn't until hours later, after breakfast had been served, after the ship had docked in Curacao, that the crew officially began a search. By then, hundreds of passengers had already left the vessel. Amy's family stood helplessly on the deck, watching as the ship emptied, realizing that whoever or whatever had taken Amy could already be long gone. When local police finally arrived, they searched the waters, the nearby docks, and the surrounding coast. Nothing. No trace. No body, no clue. It was as if Amy had simply vanished into the air. That morning, the Bradley family's world collapsed, and what followed was a trail of questions that no one seemed willing to answer. Why didn't the ship stop? Why didn't they alert authorities immediately? And why did so many witnesses later report seeing Amy alive after that morning? This was not an accident. It was the beginning of something far stranger and far more disturbing. The missing hours. Every missing person case begins with a critical window, a few fragile hours that decide everything. For Amy Bradley, those hours were wasted. From the moment Ron realized his daughter was gone around 6 a.m., to the time the Rhapsody of the Seas finally called the authorities, nearly 8 hours had passed. In those 8 hours, hundreds of passengers disembarked in Curaçao. Crew members scrubbed, cleaned, and reset rooms for the next leg of the voyage. By the time investigators stepped aboard, any potential evidence, fingerprints, stray fibers, even DNA, was likely gone. According to statements, crew members performed only a casual check of common areas before resuming normal duties. No emergency alerts, no shipside announcements. The Bradley family, desperate, began their own search, knocking on doors, showing Amy's picture, pleading for help. Some passengers remembered seeing Amy in the early hours near the elevators with a man from the ship's band. Others thought they spotted her on a deck, disoriented, frightened, but no one could confirm where she went next. When the ship finally docked, authorities began interviewing staff and passengers. But even though it was rushed, the ship was scheduled to depart again within hours. Witness statements were inconsistent. Some said Amy had been drinking heavily. Others described her as sober, alert, and cautious. One band member, known only as Yellow, reportedly told Amy's father, "I'm sorry about your daughter," before anyone had officially declared her missing. That single line would haunt Ron Bradley for years. As the day dragged on, the FBI was finally notified. But by then, it was too late for a crime scene. No photos of her cabin were taken, and no deck footage was preserved. The surveillance system, limited to certain hallways, had already overwritten the recordings. The official statement from the cruise line called it a tragic overboard accident, but the Bradleys refused to believe it. Amy was a strong swimmer. The seas were calm, and there was one more detail, one that would ignite a firestorm of questions. Several passengers claimed they saw Amy that morning after she'd already been declared missing. So, if Amy didn't fall overboard, where did she go? And who wanted to make sure she was never found? The search fails. By the afternoon of March 24th, hope had already begun to fade. The Rhapsody of the Seas continued its schedule, gliding toward Curaçao as though nothing had happened. For the Bradleys, it was unthinkable. Their daughter had vanished on a ship filled with 2,000 people, and yet no one was truly looking for her. When the ship finally docked, the local Coast Guard was notified. Small boats were deployed to scan the coastline. Helicopters circled the waters, their searchlights cutting through turquoise waves. But with no specific starting point, no eyewitness, and no confirmed time of disappearance, the search was little more than a guess. The currents that morning were calm, drifting north at less than 1 knot, meaning if Amy had gone overboard, her body should have been found nearby. It wasn't. And that's when the Bradleys' fear turned to anger. They pleaded with Royal Caribbean officials to delay the ship's departure to preserve the scene, to search every cabin, to question every crew member. The request was denied. The company insisted the ship had a schedule to keep. Amy's parents were escorted off the ship, left behind in Curaçao alone, confused and devastated. In the following days, the local search continued. Flyers were printed in English and papiamento, distributed across the island. Fishermen and divers scoured the nearby reefs. Nothing. Back in the U.S., the FBI began reviewing the limited data provided by Royal Caribbean. But there were immediate inconsistencies. The ship's log did not match passenger statements. Crew interviews were incomplete, and the captain's official report listed Amy's disappearance as an overboard incident before any evidence supported it. For Ron and Iva Bradley, it was more than negligence, it was betrayal. The company they trusted for a family vacation had turned its back when it mattered most. Days turned into weeks. The Caribbean sun blazed over the same waters that had swallowed their hope. Then came the first glimmer of fragment of light in the darkness. A tourist in Curacao claimed she saw a woman resembling Amy walking with two men, appearing frightened. When shown Amy's photograph, she didn't hesitate. "That's her," she said. The report reignited the family's search. Could Amy still be alive? If so, who was keeping her from coming home? The search had failed, but the mystery was only deepening. In the next chapter, we step into the world of conflicting stories, strange coincidences, and chilling possibilities. The witnesses. In any disappearance, witnesses are the eyes of truth. But in Amy Bradley's case, their stories only deepen the confusion. After Amy vanished, the FBI began interviewing the Rhapsody of the Sea's passengers and crew. Some remembered nothing unusual. Others remembered everything. One witness, a passenger named Crystal Roberts, claimed she saw Amy early that morning between 5:15 and 5:30 a.m., standing with a member of the ship's band near the glass elevators on Deck 4. That band member's name was Alistair Douglas, known on board as Yellow. According to multiple accounts, Amy had danced with him at the ship's nightclub the night before she disappeared. Several photos even showed them smiling together. But what seemed innocent at first began to sound more troubling. After Amy went missing, Yellow approached Ron Bradley, Amy's father, and said something no one could forget. "I'm sorry about your daughter." The words were spoken before anyone had officially announced her disappearance. How did he know? The Bradleys pressed for answers. Yellow denied involvement, claiming he had simply heard rumors. But rumors don't spread on a ship that hasn't told its passengers someone is missing. Another couple reported seeing Amy near the ship's elevator hours after her father last saw her, describing her as alert, talking with a man, before both disappeared down a corridor. Each account pointed to one haunting truth. Amy did not vanish into the sea. She was seen alive, on board, after the time she was believed missing. Still, the cruise company dismissed these statements, insisting Amy must have fallen overboard. The FBI followed procedure, but found no physical evidence. It was a case built on contradictions. Some passengers described the crew as uncooperative, even defensive. Others said they were told not to talk to the Bradleys. And while the family searched frantically, the ship's staff prepared for its next voyage, polishing, cleaning, moving on. Then, another strange encounter. One crew member allegedly claimed that Amy had been seen on deck with two men early that morning, men no one could later identify. No CCTV footage was ever recovered to confirm or deny it. Piece by piece, a picture began to form. Not an accident, but of something organized, something deliberate. For the Bradleys, these witness statements weren't just clues, they were proof that Amy had been taken. But as with every mystery at sea, for every truth that surfaces, a dozen more sink beneath the waves. The witnesses saw enough to raise questions, but not enough to bring answers. And as we'll uncover in the next chapter, those missing answers would soon lead to global headlines, false hopes, and chilling sightings across the Caribbean. Theories emerge. By April 1998, the case of Amy Lynn Bradley had spread far beyond the Caribbean. News outlets in the United States began reporting the story of the woman who vanished at sea. For the first time, the world was asking the same question her parents had been screaming since day one. How does someone simply disappear from a cruise ship? As authorities scrambled for answers, three theories began to dominate the conversation. Theory 1, the accident. The simplest explanation. That Amy, perhaps disoriented or tired, leaned over the balcony rail, lost her balance, and fell into the ocean. It's the version the cruise line supported from the beginning. But there was one problem. Amy was a certified lifeguard, an excellent swimmer, and the waters that morning were calm. If she had fallen, her body should have surfaced nearby. It never did. Theory 2, suicide. Investigators briefly considered the possibility that Amy had taken her own life. But those who knew her, her family, her friends, even her coworkers rejected the idea completely. Amy had just landed a new job. She was excited about her future. She was making plans. And most importantly, there was no note, no warning, no sign of distress. Theory 3, abduction. the most disturbing and the one that refused to fade. Witnesses had placed Amy with strange men. Sightings continued for years after the disappearance on beaches, in bars, in nightclubs. One American naval officer claimed he saw a woman in Curacao being escorted by two men who wouldn't let her speak. He said she looked terrified. When he later saw Amy's missing poster, he was certain it was her. Later, a Canadian tourist claimed she saw Amy in 1999 inside a brothel whispering, "My name is Amy Bradley. I need help." The report was shocking and heartbreaking. When investigators returned to the location, it had already burned down. Over time, a chilling possibility began to take shape, one that tied together the witness statements, the delayed search, and the strange behavior of certain crew members. Could Amy have been trafficked, sold, or forced into captivity by someone who knew how to make people disappear on international waters? Experts in maritime law confirm a cruise ship is a perfect setting for exploitation. Jurisdiction is murky. Cameras cover only common areas. And once you reach port, thousands of people can disembark, no questions asked. In 2005, more than 7 years later, an image surfaced on a website linked to human trafficking investigations showing a woman with striking resemblance to Amy. She appeared older. Her hair was longer, but her eyes unmistakably were hers. The FBI investigated but could never confirm its authenticity. Whether real or not, the photo reignited one terrifying thought. What if Amy didn't die at sea, but was taken from it? Theories continued to multiply, but one truth remained. No matter how much time passed, every lead led back to the same haunting silence. The ocean gave nothing back. Next, the story shifts from theories to emotion. The family's nightmare. When Amy Lynn Bradley vanished, her family's life shattered overnight. For most people, a vacation ends with souvenirs, photographs, and memories. For the Bradleys, it ended with questions that have never stopped echoing. Back in Virginia, Ron and Iva Bradley refused to sit still. They appeared on talk shows, pleaded on the news, and worked with private investigators. Every night, they replayed the same scene in their minds, Amy walking out of her cabin and never coming back. "It's like she vanished in a thin air," Ron said. "But I know my daughter. Someone took her." Weeks after the disappearance, the Bradleys began receiving calls, sightings of a woman who looked like Amy. Curacao, Barbados, Aruba. Each time, they flew out immediately, following whispers through nightclubs, beaches, and dark corners of Caribbean towns. One bartender claimed Amy had been seen with a group of men appearing anxious, glancing toward the door. Another woman said she spotted her in a shopping district, thinner, older, but unmistakably Amy. And then there was the photograph. In 2005, a private investigator discovered a series of photos on an adult website known for trafficking victims. One image stopped him cold: a woman lying on a bed, expression vacant, her eyes filled with quiet terror. Her name on the site, Jazz. But the Bradleys knew that face. It was Amy. The FBI was notified immediately. The image was analyzed by forensic experts, who confirmed the resemblance was strong, though not definitive. That one photo reignited the Bradleys' hope in their torment. If Amy was alive, where was she? And why couldn't anyone bring her home? Over the years, the Bradleys became relentless advocates for missing persons, turning their grief into purpose. They funded private searches, worked with Interpol, and pressured cruise lines to improve onboard security. Yet despite everything, no evidence ever surfaced to prove what really happened. Each anniversary brought the same pain and the same haunting silence. Iva once said in an interview, "Every time the phone rings, I hope it's her voice. Every night, I dream she's knocking on the door." For the Bradleys, Amy's story never ended. It simply changed shape from a missing persons case to a lifelong mission for truth. And yet, beneath all the noise and theories, one terrifying thought refuses to fade. Amy didn't vanish into the sea. She vanished into someone's silence. The cruise line controversy. The ocean hides many secrets, but some are man-made. In the aftermath of Amy Bradley's disappearance, one truth began to emerge. Cruise ships weren't just vessels of luxury, they were floating jurisdictions, drifting between laws, nations, and accountability. When the Bradley family demanded records from Royal Caribbean, they met silence. The company released only a brief statement. "We believe Amy Bradley fell overboard." No apology, no responsibility. Behind the scenes, however, investigators and maritime lawyers painted a disturbing picture. Cruise ships operate under a concept known as flags of convenience. That means most ships are registered in countries with weak safety regulations, places like Liberia, the Bahamas, or Panama, far from the ports they actually sail from. The result? When something goes wrong at sea, it's unclear who's in charge. FBI jurisdiction applies only if a U.S. citizen is involved and the ship is within certain distances of U.S. waters. Otherwise, investigations fall into a confusing mix of local and international authorities, a bureaucratic maze where evidence disappears faster than the waves themselves. For the Bradleys, that loophole was devastating. By the time officials boarded the Rhapsody of the seas, hours had passed, passengers had scattered, and critical areas had already been cleaned. It was like investigating a crime scene after someone had vacuumed the floor, one former investigator said. But Amy's case wasn't an isolated one. Between 1995 and 2025, more than 400 people have vanished from cruise ships worldwide. Some were suicides, some accidents, but dozens, maybe hundreds, remain unexplained. Families across the globe share the same nightmare. Phone calls unanswered, reports delayed, companies denying liability. And when footage, logs, or witness statements do exist, they're often lost or accidentally erased. Over the years, whistleblowers from multiple cruise lines have spoken out, alleging internal pressure to avoid bad publicity. "We were told to keep it quiet," one former employee confessed. "If someone disappears, we keep sailing." For the Bradleys, that silence was unbearable. They lobbied Congress, pushing for stronger laws. Their fight helped spark the Cruise Vessel Security and Safety Act, requiring ships to report serious crimes immediately to the FBI. But even with that law, enforcement remains weak. Because at sea, truth floats between borders. And for every Amy Bradley, there are others' names you've never heard. Families still waiting, cases never solved. Each one a reminder that paradise can hide predators, and that sometimes the most dangerous waters aren't beneath you, they're the systems above. The sightings. Years passed, but Amy Bradley's name refused to fade. The story of the woman who vanished at sea had taken on a life of its own, whispered in travel forums, dissected on talk shows, and debated by investigators across the world. Yet amid all the noise, one thing kept the Bradleys searching: the sightings. In 1999, just 1 year after Amy disappeared, 2 Canadian tourists vacationing in Curacao reported seeing a woman who looked exactly like her. They said she was walking along a beach barefoot, tense, and flanked by 2 men. She tried to speak but was pulled away. The sighting was filed with the FBI, but no follow-up action was ever made public. A few months later, an American Navy petty officer contacted authorities. He claimed he saw Amy in a brothel on the same island. "She looked straight at me," he said. "She wanted to say something, but the men beside her wouldn't let her." When he returned to the U.S. and saw Amy's missing poster, he nearly collapsed. He was sure it was her. The FBI investigated, but by the time they reached the brothel, it had already been destroyed in a fire. Then came the 2005 photograph. A private investigator working for the Bradleys stumbled upon a website linked to human trafficking operations in the Caribbean. One of the women in the gallery, labeled only as Jazz, looked eerily like Amy. Her hair was darker, her face older, but her eyes, those unmistakable eyes, told a story of recognition and pain. The FBI analyzed the image. Forensic facial experts could not confirm the identity, but the resemblance was striking enough to reopen public interest. Once again, headlines flared. Could Amy Bradley still be alive? But the answer was as elusive as ever. In 2010, a new tip came from a Caribbean bartender claiming a woman calling herself Amy frequented his bar, always escorted, always silent. When shown a photo of Amy Lynn Bradley, he said quietly, "That's her. I'd bet my life on it." Yet again, investigators arrived too late. The woman was gone. To some, the sightings proved Amy was trafficked, living under control, waiting for rescue. To others, they were coincidences, painful illusions born of desperation and hope. But one thing remained certain. The world was still looking for Amy. Each new lead, each whisper from strangers, pulled the Bradleys back into the cycle of grief and possibility. They had been chasing ghosts for over 2 decades, yet refused to stop. Because sometimes, hope is the only thing that keeps the missing alive. The hunt for truth. As the years passed, Amy Bradley's name faded from the front pages, but not from the hearts of those who refused to forget. Private investigators, amateur detectives, and online communities kept the case alive. Forums dedicated to missing persons began connecting clues across continents, comparing witness statements, facial similarities, and digital patterns. In 2012, a former FBI consultant named Frank Jones claimed he had found Amy alive in Curacao. He told the Bradleys she was being held by traffickers in a guarded house, and that he had men on the ground ready to rescue her. The family sent him thousands of dollars for operations and logistics, only to discover later that Jones was a fraud. His story, like so many others, was built on greed and hope. Yet even after being betrayed, the Bradleys didn't stop. They kept searching, reaching out to anyone who claimed to know something: ex-detectives, psychics, travelers, journalists. One psychic described seeing Amy on a beach, alive but not free. Another spoke of a locked room, a window facing the water. None of it could be verified, but somehow, each message kept the family going, feeding the one thing the ocean couldn't drown: hope. By 2020, a new generation of online investigators reignited the case. They used digital face mapping to analyze hundreds of photos from Caribbean tourist sites. Some found possible matches. Others uncovered suspicious posts from people connected to cruise line employees at the time. Each clue led to another, an endless web of maybes, what-ifs, and coincidences that blurred the line between truth and obsession. Amy's story is a reminder of how quickly a person can vanish. Not into nature, but into human systems built to erase them, said one investigator. The sea didn't take her. People did. And yet, despite the work, despite the technology, no one has ever found a single piece of definitive evidence of what happened to Amy Bradley. No remains, no confessions, no closure, just fragments, voices, photos, and stories carried like driftwood on the tide. More than 2 decades later, Amy's case has become something larger, a mirror reflecting the failures of an industry, the limits of justice, and the power of a family's unbroken will. But the question that lingers, the one that drives every theory, every search, every sleepless night, is still the same. Where is Amy Lynn Bradley? The legacy of a lost daughter. It's been more than 25 years since Amy Lynn Bradley vanished from the Rhapsody of the seas. Her face, once on missing posters, TV screens, and newspapers, has become a symbol. A reminder that disappearance doesn't always mean silence. Sometimes, it means a voice that refuses to fade. The Bradley family never stopped searching. They've kept her photo close taped to walls, pinned on desks, tucked into travel bags. For them, Amy is not a cold case. She's a heartbeat still echoing somewhere in the distance. In the years since her disappearance, her story has sparked international change. Lawmakers in the United States introduced new safety and reporting standards for cruise ships. Families of other missing passengers reached out, forming alliances, advocacy groups, and memorial foundations. Because for every name we know: Amy Bradley, Rebecca Corium, Marion Carver, there are hundreds more the world has never heard. Through documentaries, interviews, and online investigations, Amy's story continues to travel, reaching new audiences, new generations, and new hearts. Some hear it as a warning, others as a mystery that still whispers from the deep. But to those who loved her, it's a promise that the search will never stop. Ron Bradley once said, "We'll never stop looking for Amy. We'll keep her story alive until she walks back through our door." And maybe that's what this story truly is: not a tragedy, but a torch. A light passed from those who lost, to those who listen, and to those who choose to care. Because somewhere out there, in the vast silence between waves, a truth still waits to be found. Amy Lynn Bradley vanished, but never forgotten. You've followed this journey. Don't let it end here. Share Amy's story. Comment with your thoughts or theories. Subscribe for more true investigations and mysterious disappearances. Because awareness is how the missing is remembered, and justice is how they are found. After the waves, the sea is a strange place. It gives, it takes, and sometimes it hides. For more than 2 decades, the disappearance of Amy Lynn Bradley has haunted those who heard her story. Not just because she vanished, but because of how easily it could happen again. Each year, more people disappear from cruise ships, tourists, workers, travelers seeking escape. Some are found. Most are not. The ocean, vast and indifferent, swallows evidence, time, and truth. But Amy's story remains. A ripple that refuses to fade, a mystery that will not sink. For the Bradleys, the years have been long and cruel. Yet their love, their determination, and their belief that Amy is still out there have turned grief into a force greater than fear. Her disappearance didn't just expose a family's nightmare. It revealed the fragile trust between travelers and the world that promises them safety. There are still no answers, no closure, no goodbye. Just the haunting thought that somewhere, somehow, the truth still breathes waiting to be heard. Maybe in the next witness, maybe in an old photo, maybe in someone's memory that hasn't faded yet. And until that truth comes to light, Amy Bradley's name will continue to echo, not as a mystery unsolved, but as a reminder that the missing deserves more than silence. If this story moved you, don't let it vanish too. Hit like, share this story to keep her voice alive, and subscribe to join us as we uncover more mysteries the world tried to forget. Because in the end, remembering them is the search. The woman who vanished at sea, the Amy Bradley mystery that still haunts the Caribbean. Some stories end with justice. Others just drift. Amy Bradley's name has become a whisper carried by the tide, a reminder that not every mystery has a resolution, and not every ocean gives back what it takes. Maybe she was lost. Maybe she was taken. Or maybe she's still out there, somewhere between waves. If this story made you think, if it made you feel something, don't let it disappear too. Like this video, share it, and subscribe to the Mystery Vault, where we explore the mysteries the world forgot, one haunting story at a time. Because in the end, what vanishes can still be found if we keep searching.